Welcome back once again. The Force Cult Show is here. We are on the digital air because do radio shows even exist anymore?
I'm on analog. I don't know
You're
about the rest of
analoging it?
you, but yeah,
Yeah. I dropped an analog earlier.
that's well, that's what you call it, isn't it?
Yep. How you doing, buddy?
I am well. I am well. Just enjoying the beautiful, rainy, overcast Pacific Northwest winter.
Well, it is January here and we're scraping 60-degree weather, so I don't know what's going on, but hey.
Dude, that's awesome. I am about to go to Phoenix for the weekend. Just a very
Ooh.
quick turnaround to see some
Ah,
family there. We're all kind of meeting there at the same time, and they're getting to stay longer. But yeah, I'll just be there basically like Saturday and Sunday, so I'll get some sun in. So get my vitamin D for the rest of the winter, and head back to you know to nothingness, to
I
to
saw
gray,
Phoenix
dreary
once.
weather.
I saw Phoenix once at ACL. They were all right.
That's not the same, but okay.
Yeah, okay. Well, you are correct in thinking that this is a Star Wars podcast. At least most of the time it is. Um, Welcome to Force Cult. I'm Travis, joined by my host, Mr. Jip, or Jip, as
Jip Jarin.
if you were a Mandalorian or a foundling of some kind, perhaps.
I am a foundling.
Um,
In a way, we're all foundlings,
We are
Travis.
all our family, especially if you're part of the Force Cult family. Consider yourself a foundling.
You've been
We're a
adopted
clan.
in.
We're a clan of many.
Bring me some Beskar if you want to earn your keep.
If we were to start a rap group, we could call ourselves the Beskar Boys, but like BEZ or something like that, or the S could be a dollar sign, maybe,
Well, yeah. What else would it be?
or an imperial credit sign, maybe something like that. I don't know. Um, So last episode, we it was the first episode of the year, first time we had talked since Rise of Skywalker. We only kind of scratched the surface there, and we'll get back to it. But the thing we kind of hopped over, just because that seemed to be the thing we needed to talk about at the time, was the season finale of The Mandalorian, which was episode 8, Redemption, directed by Taika Waititi.
And it was
Phenomenal.
incredible.
It was incredible. And while we're there now, since this is just a kind of blip of news, we can come back to it later if we want. It's rumored that Taika is being, he's in discussion about directing a Star Wars and not just an episode of a show,
You
which
know,
is
I
pretty
am
cool.
I am very excited about this news. He, I mean, he has not done anything that I've been disappointed with. He makes me smile. He's absolutely hilarious as an actor. He does great voiceover work, as we've seen with IG in The Mandalorian. He's a phenomenal director. Everything he's done, I've been really
Yeah.
impressed by, whether it's Marvel or otherwise. And
Which, if you haven't seen Jojo Rabbit, incredible film.
which I'm actually planning
Absolutely
on seeing this
fantastic.
week, which I'm very
Yeah,
excited
it's
about.
re-releasing, which is even better.
Yeah,
So yeah, go check that out.
yeah. So I'm pumped about that, just because he's done nothing but be successful, and he's not just done that in like one specific way. He's kind of a chameleon, but even in his
Yeah,
ability to show different kinds of talent on screen, and stretch his legs in different ways, like he still has his own flavor, um, and brings something of himself to his artwork, so that it's not like he's um, just aping other people's styles. Like he definitely has his own style, but he's able to kind of like mold that around, um, what the requests are from, producers or studios or what have you. And there are not very many people who can do that.
yeah. It's I mean, there's definitely, I'm sure he's got his influences, and they may be some more obscure ones. Um, and I think no director is without that, but I think he's one of the fresher voices in cinema in recent years. So I'm really excited to, I think the Mandalorian has been this like kind of testing ground for the future of Star Wars. And, I mean, the fact that Deborah Chow's getting the Obi-Wan series, and, it's just this place that they're kind of like, I think they're kind of like, let's see how, these people play with one episode of this
Yeah,
show.
which I think is really
And
freaking smart.
yeah, yeah. And this episode was a perfect example of that. It, despite being kind of one of the only two-parter episodes, it felt seamless, picking up from the previous episode, and it's one of my favorites. I think, you know, it's created, I think, some of the like greatest little moments, like in meme and GIF format of the season, and also I think I'm sure it's one of those moments that people have watched it with great anger. Is one of the opening scenes of the two scout
Yeah,
troopers,
yeah. Jen Marie got
played by
pretty pissed about that one. That's for sure.
yeah, Jason Sudeikis and Adam Pally played these scout troopers, which they do an absolutely phenomenal job. It has such a it, there's been so much more modern stormtrooper banter in all the new films, so this was just like taking it a step further. I think something like that probably wouldn't have worked well, maybe necessarily in one of the films, like to that
Oh
extent,
yeah,
giving that much screen time to characters like that, which I think is like partly why they cut Tom Hardy's bit out of The Last Jedi. It's like it's just a little too
exactly.
much.
Yeah,
But this fits so perfectly nestled in the beginning of this episode, and kind of like it's things are so serious to just kind of have that comedic tension, and not only that, but like to make us hate these like imperial um uh, whatever these
scuzz buckets.
leftover factions. Yeah, total scuzz buckets. These leftover factions, to just like kind of hate them all the more. And it serves a great storytelling around Moff Gideon's character too, of what Jason Sudeikis is saying about like he killed one of his own guys just to prove a point. Like we're, despite it being a comedic scene, we're also building on a villain who we're gonna see more of in the future of the series. So um I don't know about you, but it hurt me a little bit every time they punch the child.
Yeah. Well, I
Like,
mean, if you didn't, like visibly and like physically like cringe and like grit your teeth some
yeah.
when they're doing that, like you're probably not human. But he definitely gets his revenge. At least,
Oh, for
partially
sure.
through his own actions and then 100% through IG's actions. So, you know,
Yeah.
if you're an eye for an eye kind of person, then you didn't leave too terribly disappointed, I don't think.
Yeah, yeah. No, it's that was a great way to begin. My wife, when we watched it, she just was like looking at me like, did they just? And I was like, yeah.
Maybe he
And it
deserved
definitely
it.
is
Did you
sad.
ever think about that?
Right. He did try choking out Cara Dune. We haven't
He
addressed
is
that,
50 years old, guys. Like, let's give him
Um,
a little bit of credit. Like, he's not a real baby,
little
right?
ornery.
Maybe he's a
Yeah,
punk.
yeah. Um, and my wife was kind of hoping after the ending of the previous episode that Queel might have survived. Like, maybe they just shot his blur got from under him or something like that. But sure enough, it was sad to see that character go. Nolte brought uh, he brought some gravitas to the show through that character, I think, which was really neat. And it was kind of sad to see that go, especially after the development of like the seventh episode with between IG
Yeah, I was
and his
hoping to see
character.
more of him. But,
It was
it's
really
one of those things where, you don't want to feel like everybody's got
gotta
plot
have
armor
stakes.
and there needs to be stakes. And,
Yeah.
who are you going to lose? Like, we
Hmm.
already lost IG once, and so that's not going to have the same sort of impact. And then
Right.
also he's a droid. Cara Dune, she's so present, and then also she's one of the only human characters that we see their face that we have to connect to, and so it's just not super practical to lose her. So like you start
Yeah.
like kind of paring down who you're going to keep and who you're going to lose, and it gets kind of obvious pretty quickly who you're going to have to lose if you believe that that's something that was necessary there. So
Yeah, he definitely helps kind of drive that, and he's sort of this mentor figure for. I think it's funny that we can call him something now, to call him Din. Um, that we get a name for him, and yeah, he was kind of this nudge for Mando, in the series, in both episodes in the episodes he's in it. He kind of acts as this like reminder of like, you're more than capable of doing things, and not only that, but like there's good people in this galaxy too. And
which is really interesting that his
yeah,
character would
we had
be the
talked.
person to do that, since he's the one who's lived, what is it, 3 lifetimes in slavery to the Empire, the way he frames it. So,
Yeah,
which I'm kind of
yeah.
like, well,
Hmm.
3 of a human's lifetimes in slavery. I'm starting to like count years, and I'm like, I don't know that that really makes any sense with the lifetime of the Empire. Which, if you're going to take that really literally,
Yeah,
and he's not speaking in hyperbole, what does that mean about the Republic, and what they were doing prior
yeah.
to the Empire being installed?
Or
So,
where he
so yeah,
came
I
from
think that's
before and
interesting.
stuff. Yeah.
Maybe it's a warlord or something like that who throws him out somewhere to work, and then it ends up being the Empire who ultimately he pays his debt off to. I mean, we don't really know. In classic
Yeah.
Star Wars storytelling, the way somebody phrases something the first time you hear it isn't necessarily literally the exact way that things occurred. So
Much to the parsec debate,
hey,
early on.
hey, 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 let's not bring up the whole parsec thing.
You and I have discussed this. Is probably that was probably one of the first Star Wars discussions we ever had.
Yeah,
Actually,
probably.
was the
Where we were
parsec
like,
discussion.
exactly. Yeah, it's not a plot hole.
Yeah.
Nobody gets it.
Uh,
Because
uh,
this is why, is because this is probably why we discussed it, is I had an astronomy professor
I think
at
so.
Baylor
Yeah.
bring it up, and he was asking if anybody knew about it, and nobody raised their hand, and so I raised my hand, um, and he started talking about how it was this plot hole, it's a mistake, blah blah blah, and I raised my hand again and had to explain to him why in the actual books and why in canon it's not problematic, and it's actually they are talking about distance rather than speed, and I could kind of like see the light go out of his eyes, because like his favorite illustration that he'd probably been using for like 20 years all of a sudden
Yeah.
had been like lit on fire in front of his
Just
eyes.
shattered.
So in retrospect, I feel a little guilty about it, but also I don't feel
Nah.
guilty about it at all. So
Hey, the teachers need to learn too.
sometimes teachers
I
just don't understand.
Yeah. We had talked last week about, kind of stakes with Rise of Skywalker, of how, we felt like while the stakes had never been higher, they were very low at the same time too, with like Chewie and 3PO.
Yeah.
And so I think this was to me a more accurate weight to put on something like that. And I mean, yeah, despite IG coming back, which was kind of something I felt from the first episode, that I was like, it's a shame to see Taika, you know, in and out in a single episode. Same with Nolte's character, that, we only see him initially in one episode, and you're kind of like, certainly we're going to get him back, right? And, so to bring those characters back, I think to ultimately serve a really great purpose for telling the story and for help building our central character, um, to take them away, with purpose at that point, I thought was very instrumental to the storytelling.
Yeah, I thought that was emotionally very evocative. Um, we did, and I didn't feel some sort of like strong emotional connection to IG. That's not as easy to develop, I guess. But um,
Yeah.
yeah, losing a character that was kind of like the humanity of the show thus far, really. Yeah, I mean that really hits you in the gut. I mean that's meaningful. That's weighty, and
Well, so
I think that kind of goes back to once again the source material, from whence Lucas came, the old serials and cowboy shows and samurai movies, and it's like, I mean, that kind of thing happens. People die. The person that
yeah,
is the Jiminy Cricket for the main character frequently had to sacrifice themselves for the main character to be able to like take the necessary steps to like hit the growth point where they needed to get to for whether it's that season, or for the climax of whatever film it is. So that's a pretty tried and true storytelling technique.
yeah, yeah, and not only with his character, but what you kind of mentioned, not necessarily having this emotional attachment to IG, but what his reprogramming and his return means for our main character, and you know his uh, distaste for droids and how important that was, kind of as a final push, you know, to to uh, save our main character on multiple ways. Um, and did you think we'd see his face?
No, not at all. I was very
I
surprised by that.
Yeah, I did not expect it either. I thought, maybe he'll, even in the scene as they're talking about it, I thought, you know, they'll go to a, over the shoulder from Mando and we still won't see his face. Like we'll see IG pull it off, helmet off, but we still won't see his face. And yeah, I was actually fairly surprised that we did.
Yeah, it just was not at all what I expected. And I'm, not emotionally connected to him never showing his face or, alternatively getting to see his face. But I was very
Hmm.
surprised. I thought that they might,
Yeah.
wait on that another season before we got to actually see it. But I think that, it was good payoff, and keeping it, rare, I think is probably important. Um,
Oh, for sure. For
so
sure.
I was number one surprised by getting his name, and number two surprised by seeing his
Yeah.
face. The fact that it's just like yelled out. It's like, oh, okay, well, I guess we know his name now. Like, holy crap! And then all of a sudden we're seeing his face. I was pretty blown away by that. So
Not only getting his name, but getting like Kara's full name, finding out about grief, and him being a disgraced magistrate and stuff like that. That was that 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 was like, to me, a very informationally dense opening to the episode
it's like a
with
big
that
gut
all that
punch.
stuff.
Like these
Yeah.
people who
Like, whoa.
have built their own mythos around themselves to protect themselves in a time of great upheaval and confusion are laid bare so easily by Moff Gideon. And information is power, and so many of these types of
Yeah.
sci-fi kinds of environments, and their ability to keep themselves secretive and hidden, uh, is in its own way, it is power. So like the Razor Crest being untraceable and never having been impounded or anything like that is something that gives
Hmm.
the Mando some semblance of power that other people don't have. Like it gives him a strength that people can't pay for, and all of a sudden it's just laid bare. That I think is something that will come back in season two in a pretty significant way.
Speaking of season two and names, I guess it's been teased that we will learn the child's name in season two.
Frank.
Frank. I'm still. If it's Colin, man.
His name is actually Fanny Pack Frank because he lives in a fanny pack. And yeah, Colin, Frank.
Yeah, if it's Colin,
If it
I'll
doesn't
go
follow
crazy.
the Yodelini uh, or like Yoda or Yodello, like if we're not getting Yaddle, um, if it's not going to follow like the Yaddle Yoda naming
Or
convention,
Yo
I'll be
Mama.
interested to see what they do.
Yeah.
Since the only two iterations of this species have had very similar sounding names, I expect it'll be
Hmm.
in the same vein.
Yeah. I mean, I'm under the idea that we'll either get something like that or that he'll be given a new name, maybe. Um, but it's hard to say. You know.
Yin Jaren, however you say it, Djarin, Jaren.
Yo, Jaren.
Yeah, instead of Din, it'll be Yin.
Yeah. Trying to think of some of the things in this episode. Well, I mean, because there's really was just a lot of great stuff in it. The great moment that Colin has of holding back the uh, like the Inferno
So
Trooper
freaking cool.
is absolutely brilliant and beautiful. Just seeing every scene they've played on the force that he uses has been executed very very well. That I don't feel like they've like overdone those scenes, and they haven't like they've really treated it absolutely beautifully. Everything from the force healing to um, to the force choking to just stopping the mud horn and stuff like that have just been executed so
Yeah,
well.
there are two things that his ability to like hold back the fire um, have like made me think of. And first off, uh, I thought of the daughter in The Incredibles, and secondly, I thought of the
Oh yeah.
Invisible Woman, um, or
Mm.
Sue Storm in Fantastic Four, like just projecting like a force field basically to protect the people that he
Yeah.
loves and cares about. And so that was just something like in the moment that I was like, oh my gosh, that's very um, very much like invoking that in my mind. I don't know whether or not they intended it to be
Yeah.
perceived that way, but I thought that was a cool little similarity to those two characters. I highly doubt they
Yeah, we haven't.
were invoking uh, the daughter in Incredibles before they would do Sue Storm, but I mean, I'm throwing it out there because that is and probably supposed to hearken to Sue Storm as well. So
Yeah, we haven't necessarily seen a lot of force fields or force fields.
yeah, I mean, we got
However
it
you want to
in
call them.
Rebels with Kanan.
Yeah, Kanan
Um,
uses it.
and I think that's the only thing that I
Yeah.
can think of where that happens.
I want to say there was maybe one use of it in the last season of Clone Wars, but I can't remember. I could be totally wrong. Um, but yeah, it's been used very little, but it's such what I think is kind of cool about some of Force powers we see is like, sometimes people are like, why can't they do this? Why can't they do that? And like how, not everyone is going to be talented in the same way within the
Like some
Force.
people are
Just
going to have
like,
force powers
you
for
know,
knitting, and some people will have force powers for like playing instruments.
like even Maz is, you could consider her force sensitive, but she is not really a force wielder.
Yeah,
So she has a connection to the force, but it kind of stops there. And kind of like Ezra, and others have been had a connection with animals, and not everybody
yeah,
has that.
and that's something that's pretty
So
significant in the novels, that we hear about. And
mhm.
so, force healing in particular is something that comes up in uh, the Mando, and then also in Episode 9, and I, in the novels, it's something where certain Jedi have the ability to practice force healing, but it's something that not everybody's talented at. And so that's something that Luke Skywalker is trying to like learn and work on, but he's not super like gifted in it. And so he, a couple times in the novels that I've read, references other specific, you know, Jedi that he's come across, whether, um, students of his or Jedi he's read about, that were able to, manifest force healing. And so I thought it was cool that, it was brought in at this point in time as something to, do the same thing where it exemplifies, a force talent that maybe isn't universal, but this particular person has access to. And I think that specific to Ray, to kind of like follow a rabbit trail. I think specific to Ray, it makes a hell
Yeah.
of a lot of sense because of who she is, the way she treats other people, and the fact that she is a very like tender person, and she's concerned with the well-being of those around her. Whether it's BB-8 when he's being drugged through the desert in a net, all the way down to kind of like adopting Finn right off the bat. She just is automatically protective of the people around her, and brings people into her
Yeah.
family very quickly, and it like shows something of her heart. And so the fact that her like force sensitivity and force abilities would manifest themselves in healing, it's just like pretty logical to me.
Yeah. I will say, and I think partly this, for those who kind of follow it all, um, I, I think the seventh episode of Mando was like a nice little tie-in with the Force healing into Rise of Skywalker, and then in some ways I felt like they tried to over present it in some ways,
Where it's kind of like, hey guys, this
you
is
know.
possible.
But yeah, Force healing's a thing. Like, it was cool to see her heal um, the serpent creature on Pisana, but like, it also would have been really cool if the first time we saw it was right after she basically fatally wounds Ben Solo.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, it's hard to say, but having that in universe is such a cool thing.
Yes.
So yes, yes it is. So going into season 2, I think there's a few ideas placed in the last episode that we can kind of have an expectation of. Um, you know, the armorers kind of tasked Din with helping find the child's family, where he comes from. Um, what do you think? Where do you think the trajectory for season 2 is now we've finished the
I
first?
think there's going to be a lot of the same in some ways, with respect to kind of like planet hopping. Um, we're going to have
Yeah,
new people introduced. There's going to be, my guess, a little bit of Cara Dune.
yeah,
Maybe she's going to be doing some research, going on her own adventures. There's some crossover from time to time, like every like fourth episode, third or fourth episode, basically. But ultimately, it's about them, hunting down clues and having to deal with people along the way who are going to be impediments to their search. I
yeah.
am doubtful that we find Collins slash Yodelini's uh, people or like source, um, prior to like the last two episodes of season 2. Maybe maybe like two set, like I don't know, like maybe like two episodes in, we end up on their planet, and there's like 10,000 of these little Yodas hopping around, and we spend a lot of time getting to know them, and all kinds of craziness is happening, and they've been exploited, and they're in the outer rim through a black hole or something like that. I mean, who knows
Yeah.
exactly how they're going to want to play this, but I kind of doubt we're going to get very much time, if any, with his species this next season. It just seems like it's
Yeah.
something that they'll kind of dangle out as a carrot over the course of the season and then give us, a nibble at the very end, leading into season 3, where it's like, we've gotten a glimpse, we're approaching the planet, and that's it. Now we've got to wait, for the next
Yeah.
time around, and
Yeah.
we're going to get to explore
I
that in
think we'll
season
get
3, is my guess.
Yeah, I think we'll get an important plot device somewhere in the season that will, like kind of push things there and maybe get us to the answer, but
I
the
could see us
answer
ending
won't
up
be
on
quite
Coruscant,
hmm
them trying to get access to,
Jedi
um,
archives or
the Jedi
something.
archives, now that the Empire is no longer present there. Maybe there are, criminals that have kind of like taken over certain areas, and he has to deal with that. Obviously, um, the New Republic is weak, and ends up setting up base on Hosnian Prime rather than, um,
Yeah.
on Coruscant. So maybe that opens a door for them to, kind of spend some time there. I wonder whether or not they'll be willing to spend the money to do that, because that
Yeah.
is a lot of
I
CG,
mean,
that is a lot of extra.
if you go
Um,
like lower
so
levels kind of stuff, that might be easier to
that
do
would be
where
easier. You could do
it's
like practical
tight
sets with
spaces.
some
Yeah.
like CG backgrounds and stuff, and spend a lot less money by integrating them. But if we're going to have, these big wide sweeping shots like they've got in, particularly in, Attack of the Clones, that's a lot of money to spend,
Yeah,
especially if you're
for
going to
sure.
do it with, current rendering and
Hmm.
all that kind of stuff versus what they had in, basically when we were in middle school. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
well,
I
no, I guess we were in high school at that point in time, but
I just lost my train of thought. I remember now. Haha. You brought up Coruscant and the New Republic, which made me think there's been mention of Skywalker saga characters showing up in the next season. One of which I believe was kind of rumored to be was Mon Mothma, um, and like Bosk was another one,
gosh, I would love to get Bosk. Oh
and
man, I would love it.
I saw some others. I can't remember.
If they give me Dengar even for like one
I
episode,
think I think even Dengar was briefly mentioned there too. Of course, I need to look this up now.
people would absolutely die if we ended up finding like a crispy boba somewhere, just fried out of his mind, and he's being nursed back to health by Dengar, and they run across the Mando and the child, and we have some very brief interaction. Um, I would be pretty geeked about that, just as like a little tip of the hat.
Yeah. So okay, so I found who the list of people I remembered seeing. So first off, one that I know so many people would want to see. This would be a character that you could introduce relatively freshly, since it's a comic book character only right now, which is Dr. Aphra. And I guess the rumor has been that Chloe Bennett from Agents of Shield, who is a person I like, was actually
Oh,
when I was trying to like mentally cast this character, was kind of on the top of my list.
I
Um,
actually find that to be really interesting. I would actually
and
really like that. I think because I
yeah,
like I think she's done a pretty good job on Shield. I don't think she's like the best actress in the world, um, but I think she's like a really solid TV series actress.
yeah, for sure. And in a Afra's not nearly as a like serious character as most, so she can, I think she could play up the kind of free spirit that Afra is decently. Another one is rumored is Janina Gavankar, who people may be familiar that she voiced and played Iden Versio in Battlefront 2, the campaign game, which, with what's kind of going on with Moff Gideon and the rise of the First Order at this point, a character like Iden would actually be kind of a cool cameo to get. as well as
Plus, she seems to
Shri-
like really freaking love Star Wars.
oh yeah,
So she's
Janina's
like
a
pretty like
huge fan.
outwardly passionate about it. So that would be pretty neat to bring somebody into the fold who, um, really seems to care about it.
Yeah. Shriv Sergav, who's also from Battlefront 2, he's a Nemoidian. Or no, sorry, he's a Duros. My mistake. They would hate for me to make that mix up. Um,
I am disgusted, to be
he is
frank.
he's probably one of my favorite characters from the Battlefront game, and he's popped up in the he was in Resistance Reborn actually too. He had a bit part in there. Yeah, D. Bradley Baker is rumored to play Bosk, which D. Bradley, many people may know him as basically the voice of every clone on Clone Wars and many other voices. So he is an absolute treat. And I guess there's rumor that that we'll get Bill Burr characters back, as well as Clancy Brown's character returning. But yeah, I would love to see Afra live action. I think would be fantastic. Having Gavangar in there would be really cool because Aiden's such a cool character, and I think she really fits in that kind of niche of, you know, imperial defector survivor, along with these other remaining sects of the Shattered Empire and stuff. I think would be neat, and to bring in Mon Mothma a little bit, bring in some of the politics there, I think would be really cool. And Genevieve O'Reilly is just like, it's so perfect that she's kind of aged so perfectly with this role.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
one can only hope.
yeah.
So I
It's
know we've.
there are a lot of like wide open doors for them to like give some fan service,
Mhm.
and then kind of like change the trajectory of the show a little bit. I know that there have been some people who were hoping that the show would have like a slightly different manifestation, I guess, with respect to how long the episodes were and
Yeah,
how they integrate with one another. Um,
of being a
so
little less episodic
exactly,
come season 2.
exactly, and so it'll be interesting to see whether or not they try to bring a more like modern storytelling motif, kind of like within the context of what's been going on in TV for the last, well, basically, let's say since The Sopranos,
Yeah.
the HBOification, that's gone on with TV over the last almost 2 decades now.
For
Um,
sure.
I mean, it's had impact. It changes the way people view things, and then also the fact that it's on a streaming service where people are used to, you know,
Binge watching
binge watching
everything.
things. And The Mandalorian, I think, lends itself to binge watching. Um, from what we've gotten from season one, I'll be interested to see if they try to change some of the style so that people are more satisfied week on week with some of the narratives that we're getting. I mean, I don't know. I'm excited to see what they do. I wouldn't be surprised if season two felt different with respect to just like what they're doing with like an overall story arc and maybe like length of some of the episodes. Maybe it'll be
Yeah.
exactly the same, but I could see where they would make some changes. Number one, to keep it fresh, so that we don't like have this predictability with it, and then number two, because I think that there are people who would be really happy if there were some changes. I'm not necessarily one of them, but there were a fair number of people who I heard, say similar things. So maybe they'll listen to that. I don't know.
We'll see come the fall. So who knows? It's I'm very looking forward to the more of this show. It's a joy. So we talked about episode 9 last week. We were very, I wouldn't say tactful. We were so thrilled with the film at the point that really all we wanted to do was talk about the positives of this movie.
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
and not to
we
say
we
like
had
that
we had our
we,
few
yeah, not
critiques.
to say like we thought it was perfect,
Yeah,
but
by all
yes,
means, don't get that idea. Because no film was perfect, no Star Wars film was perfect. But there has been, I think now it's okay to really kind of get into this. We have said many times that no Star Wars is hated by Star Wars fans hate Star Wars the most, basically, and
Yeah,
the
yeah,
release
we're
of
the
this
worst.
movie, the release of this movie has been no exception to that. If anything, like it's like Last Jedi kind of really got this discourse going of you know people just having just really turning on Star Wars,
Well,
and it's like
I
it
don't
got
even want to
elevated.
say I don't even want to say it was the Last Jedi, because
Oh, I think ever since the Disney
there were people
acquisition,
like, as soon as Disney purchased, you know,
yeah,
the IP, and then they said, like, everything that you know from non film sources is no longer canon. There were people who immediately said, like, okay, like, I'm ready to fight. Whatever you do,
right,
if
yeah,
it isn't paying homage to, the books, the comics, like, whatever, KOTOR, um, then I'm going to be mad, and I'm going to let you know that I am mad. And the terrible and wonderful thing about the internet is that it lets you know what everybody's thinking at all times. Um,
it
and
lets you know what 1% of
yeah,
everybody is
this
thinking,
is
but
exactly.
those 1%
Yeah.
are very
And
loud.
so as soon as we got The Force Awakens, it's easy to forget this at this point in time, because news and, the conversation moves so quickly. And then also The Last Jedi kind of
Yeah,
dwarfs it.
for sure.
But there were like a fair number of people who were really mad post The Force
Oh
Awakens,
yeah,
all the Mary
for
Sue
sure.
stuff. There were people who've hated Rey since, day one. So this doesn't have anything to do, in my mind, this doesn't have anything to do with anything specific about The Last Jedi, outside of there being a large swath of people who basically were reactionary in their anger. And it's like, in a lot of ways, it mirrors our political environment at this point in time, because, Republicans, well, to go back even further, like, Democrats were really mad, because, of, whatever, back in the 90s, because, Clinton's impeached. Well, then, George W. Bush gets elected, and people get really, pissed at Bush. And then, the media, goes after him on SNL or whatever. And Republicans take that to heart, and they, amp it up another level. And Obama gets elected, and they're like, well, we're going to be even more mean to Obama than anybody ever was to Bush. It just like
Yeah.
amplifies back and forth, back and
Hmm.
forth. And it's gotten worse and worse. And, the level of discourse at this point in time is like, you've got a side on the left and a side on the right in this massive, cavern in between, where, no man, no woman can cross, this chasm, and, try to communicate with the other side. And much like our political environment, Star Wars has kind of done the same thing. It's like the people who liked The Force Awakens, who felt like the criticism was unfair and unwarranted, maybe responded to some of what Ryan Johnson did in a negative manner, and then it amplifies and it amplifies and it amplifies, and
Yeah.
it gets mud thrown on Solo, and then it gets mud thrown on the Rise of Skywalker. And I'm just like, man, like, I don't even know what people actually even think anymore, because
Yeah.
what I'm hearing is, you hurt my feelings before, and so now I'm mad. And so regardless of what's actually going on the screen, like, if it kind of like bends the knee toward your perspective, I'm going to hate it, whether or not it's done well.
Not only that, but I've seen so many backhanded compliments like on social media of Rise of Skywalker that I'm like, okay, so you liked it or you didn't like it? I'm still not even quite sure.
Yeah,
Like,
like, you have to know
you know,
everybody's like personal background and experience and preferences to understand what their, comments might mean, because
yeah,
everybody kind of
no,
has this like baggage at this point of time. At least, with respect to people who are like posting about it on Twitter or Instagram
hmm,
or Reddit or what have you.
yeah, I know there was probably a week, the a week after the film came out, about the next week, I think you and I were just trading like threads back and forth of just absolute ridiculousness. Like it the things that people decide to extrapolate from a movie because it either, mostly because it fits maybe an agenda that they have, or they see their agenda and their agenda wasn't met, so they need to now lash out because of that for their own agenda. And just like, it drives me crazy what people think Star Wars is supposed to be
Yeah.
sometimes,
Yeah.
like what the way they need to say this is what Star Wars is, and because I didn't get this, I'm gonna burn down the house that George built, kind
Yeah.
of
It
thing.
doesn't meet my head canon. And so, my head canon, which is, formed by my, perspective on, whether it's legends novels or video games or, comic books, um, or, now canon novels. Like I've developed and built an idea of what it has to be, for it to be, right, or for it to be good storytelling, or for it to be,
Yeah.
um, woke enough or whatever. Like I, I, what's so funny, and this, I mean, this tells you that people are not looking at it objectively, but it tells you that people are bringing something to the table, and, um, kind of like relying on preconceived notions, um, to interpret what's going on the screen. Um, there were, you know, I guess, at the very end of Rise of Skywalker, when everybody's celebrating, we see two characters kiss. Both of them are female, and they're obviously, together. They're a couple, and it's something where I've seen comments from, I'm not going to like name other podcasts or
Yeah.
things like that, but there's a group of people who are, you know, um, not
Livid that
definitely not fans of the fact that there would be
gay
uh,
representation.
a gay representation in film, and they've been very pissed off that they would include anything like this in Star Wars. And then on the other
And
side of the
they're
aisle,
yeah.
there are people who are wildly angry that we have not seen some sort of like long drawn out, same sex romance, and they're like, disgusted that they even included it, because it's like saying, well, we weren't going to give you,
If you're not going to
Poe
go
and
all the way,
Finn. Yeah,
don't do
we
it at
weren't going to
all.
give you like, Poe and Finn making out for a while, so we're going to give you
Yeah.
this. And it's like, kind of like a tip of the hat and saying like, okay, this exists within the Star Wars universe. And they were so incredibly angry that they didn't get, faux, or, whatever they call it, faux,
Pin.
pin. I don't know. Because I'm not in that world. I'm not in the shipping world, as a, mid-30s Ron Swanson of a human being. Um, and so it's like, okay, so neither side's happy, and they're both
Right.
angry about the fact that there's this specific representation, of a homosexual relationship in Star Wars now. It's like, okay, like let's step back for a second. If both of you are mad, are you reading into this your own, vitriol and your own baggage, or are you actually being an objective observer of, a movie and a fantasy that, in the words of George Lucas, was designed for 12-year-olds?
Yeah.
um, let's calm down, let's back up, like let's allow this to breathe on its own, and like let it live in its own universe, and not try to make it into something it's not. It's like, yes, Star Wars is social commentary. Star Wars does evoke, current political trends. Star Wars does all of these things because it is well written, and it does draw on things that we see in our day-to-day lives. But there is a break between that and allowing it to live inside a world where it is for 12-year-olds. Like it's not, direct social commentary and criticism in a manner that like we're going to be able to, study it in, college poli sci, and take, these really revelatory lessons from it. Like let's let it be what it is without trying to pretend like it's some sort of high art. Like, and we're people who are podcasting about this, for years on end, and we're having to be the ones to say like, okay, let's calm down. Like we've
Yeah.
committed a lot of time and effort and emotion to this. It's kind of crazy that at this point in time we're the ones who are having to kind of like, pull the reins a little bit and say let's slow down a bit, because maybe we're taking this too seriously. Maybe we've started using this as a medium for something that it's not intended to be and can't really serve as, unless we really change what ultimately its goal is supposed to be.
I think a big issue here too is people need someone to blame in it all. Like the I initially saw so many comments of like, you should be ashamed, JJ, and like,
Yeah,
just stuff like that. Well, then, and then there was like the
they
hashtag Ben
retconned
Solo
everything.
deserves
They retconned
better.
everything. Yeah.
Yeah. And then, yeah. And people are either mad that, JJ saying that JJ retconned things that Johnson set up, or saying, JJ is giving the middle finger to things Johnson did. It's like, well, I've seen interviews with him that, I don't think he necessarily feels that way. Maybe there were some things he, you know, didn't necessarily want to deal with, but I think he did a great job of pulling it all together. And then we have this hearsay information coming out about the so-called JJ cut. And now the blame is being shifted from an individual to
The
the
corporation.
corporation, exactly. And that,
Bob Iger
he
is the
lost.
devil.
Yeah.
The mouse is keeping us from getting the movie that we deserve.
Yeah. And so, then there's the gatekeepers now who are holding back the artist. And so now we've got the hashtag, give us the JJ cut kind of thing. And it's just like,
Don't turn us into
I
DC. Please don't Snyder cut
don't, yeah,
Disney
have mercy.
and Star
Not
Wars. Like, give me a freaking break.
it's and that's the thing that I don't understand is, like DC is still in a very, at least the cinematic universe is still in a very fragile state, I think. They're constantly kind of more or less rebooting. Like, I mean, the fact that we've had in a decade's time, we'll have had three different Batmans, um,
Only one of which I care
on
for.
on the silver screen, and um, that Star Wars is not in a place to be subject to a change like that. I think people don't like when Last Jedi came out too. There was this petition to have it
Redone.
redone.
Give me a
Like,
break. Oh my gosh.
and I,
This movie that made
pe-
$1 billion isn't good enough for me.
it's like the people who want to make Texas secede from the U.S. and it's like, have you stopped to think about what you're asking and what you really would get? And in this situation, you're not gonna get it. And
Yeah. Yeah.
like we even talked about like at most they might release an extended cut on come to like Blu-ray and digital of we'll get some deleted scenes that we didn't have,
Yeah.
but you're fooling yourself.
Which doesn't mean that the movie as we got it in theaters is bad. Look
Yeah,
at all of
yeah,
Lord of the Rings. The extended cuts on those are all that I watch at this point in time. I love them. I think that
yeah,
they are even better than the original theatrical releases. But that the original theatrical releases were very good all on their own. Like
yeah.
they stood on their own. They didn't have to be extended cuts. But if you're a Lord of the Rings nerd, it just gives you even more of what you already adore.
Mhm.
So yeah, of course I love it because I'm a Lord of the Rings nerd. And in the same vein, I'm a Star Wars nerd. And so yeah, of course I want an extended cut of every single Star Wars movie that exists. Give me an extra hour on every single one, please.
Yeah,
Because every single one, I guarantee you, had to have a lot of cuts to get down to, a regular human's length of
yeah.
a movie. because nobody wants to sit
Exactly.
through a 3.5 hour movie unless you're like an ultimate fanboy of whatever it is that's on screen. And there really aren't enough of us out there to hit that $1 billion mark, if we're going to be honest with
Yeah.
ourselves.
And even then it's, it's tricky to make sure that you're holding your audience, and you know even the audience that's deeply obsessed with this stuff. And then even then the people who are deeply obsessed apparently cannot be appeased. But you're fooling yourself if you think that your rants on Twitter are going to get the story completely changed.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm sorry. This is this is way more than a who shot first kind of scenario,
The who shot first
like
thing is a quaint inside joke at this point, you
exactly.
know?
Yeah. That's splitting hairs. This is people wanting an entire different haircut, hair color, and hairline,
Yeah, this is yeah,
like
we're going from, flowing locks to bald at this point.
exactly. Yeah. Your people are asking for not the impossible, but the just it's just not
They're
going
asking
to
for the
happen.
inconceivable.
Yeah. Yeah. It's unreasonable to demand something like that. And, impeach your president, but it doesn't work this way with fiction exactly.
Also, it doesn't mean anything. Like as
Yeah.
somebody who spends all this time on this podcast, who reads the books, like I mean, this is something that like is a deep, deep emotional connection for me, and I'm sure for most of our listeners is as well. Um, like this is not something that is asking or needs to be something that like makes my daily emotional state better or worse in a way that like
Yeah.
makes my life better or worse. Um,
Hmm.
like something like the president getting impeached um, is something that impacts me because I'm a citizen of the United States, and that reflects on my real life. That impacts me. That impacts the industry I work in. It impacts the people I care about who are under or not represented. Whatever it is, it does have impact. Star Wars, I mean, like talk about first world problems. Like the fact that people can
Yeah.
sit around and
Yeah.
like act as though this is akin to like murder, basically, character
Yeah.
assassination. The way people talk about this is as though Leia and Luke and Han Solo have all been murdered by one of JJ or Ryan at this point, or Kathleen Kennedy, for plenty of people as well.
Yeah.
I'm like, man, like get over yourselves. Like this is a space opera. This is entertainment. This is a movie. This is books. This is comic books. This is video games. Like this is not something that really matters ultimately with respect to our day-to-day lives. It matters in certain contexts, but this is not keeping bread on my table or anybody else's
Yeah.
unless you're the people who are actually making the movie.
Hmm. And if you're those people, then yes, it should deeply concern you, and you should be putting effort into it. And I think those people did. So I'm sorry, but if you feel that strongly about it, maybe next time, you know, um, learn a trade that finds yourself in the film industry and work your
Yeah, write
way
a script.
towards Lucasfilm. And you know what? And then we can have our discussion.
Yeah, like
But
if
yeah,
you like think that you are a good enough writer to get your ideas on screen, like please like do what is necessary to like write a script and like make that effort and like be a creator. Do something that could conceivably be put out there. Like if you feel that strongly about it to where you um, are going to have this kind of like negative emotional reaction to what we're getting with respect to Star Wars, like do something about it because
yeah.
complaining
It
is not do something about
in
it.
it's the same in the political sense there, as if you're not happy about our political climate,
Yeah.
you can make a change.
Yeah. Go, support the person that you think ought to be elected, raise money for them,
Yeah.
pound the pavement, or be the person who you think ought to be elected. Whether or not you like somebody like AOC, um, she went from bartender to House of Representatives pretty quickly. And she's obviously an intelligent woman and, was well spoken and had a lot of supporters. And so go be that person for Star Wars effectively. Whether it's, being, somebody on, a technical team, being an animator, whatever it is, if you feel that strongly about it, like, let's be productive rather than trying to tear down the work of people who've thrown their lives into it. It's become toxic and caustic enough to where it's kind of almost shameful to tell people
Yeah.
that
Oh
that
yeah.
you're a Star Wars fan because of the baggage that comes along with it, not because of the movies that were made, but because of the reaction that the fan base has had. It's shameful at this point in time, the context that comes along with Star Wars.
Which I think, eh, I mean, I don't know how you feel. Like with my friends, for the most part, I'm kind of the like the sort of top fan amidst my friends who are also Star Wars fans. So it's this is going to maybe sound super high horsey or something, but I feel like not that they revere my opinion, but they're also going to kind of like they know that I'm very set in my opinion,
It's well thought out.
and
They
but they all
respect it. They know you. They respect you. Yeah.
and they also know because we've had the conversations that at the end of the day it is a space opera for kids, and I love it for that aspect. And I'm not gonna just let myself be bent out of shape about it. And so for the most part, the most face-to-face conversations I have are pretty well received, not high tension. But yeah, it's when you want to go and embrace and connect with people across the world, but it's so hard to do right now. It's upsetting. And I say that maybe if you do have issues with new canon, you know what? You can pretend that it doesn't exist. There's those old legends out there. Let that be your story and have at it.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's all. That'll be my final word
Yeah.
there.
Just because somebody owns the IP, Disney in this case, and they have produced
Mhm.
films uh, that have made billions of dollars and have been widely seen, that doesn't mean that that's any more like valid to you as a person than your head canon or legends novels or anything you may have written on your own that fleshes out these characters in a way that speaks to you. You have the right to go out and enjoy it in that manner. We're not trying to tell anybody how they should enjoy Star Wars, but when it comes down to like the hateful, vitriolic refusal to, like be humane, I think both you and I, Travis, will take a pretty strong stand against any of that. We don't
Yep.
really have a lot of patience for that within the fandom. Um, and it's gotten to a point where it doesn't seem to be really resolving itself. It seems like it's just kind of building and building and building, and maybe shows like the Mandalorian, and then the Cassian show, and the Obi-Wan show, and then maybe a potential future Taika Waititi Star Wars film are the remedy for our souls collectively. um, I mean, I don't know. I'm not holding out a ton of hope because I don't think that we've necessarily proven that we can be, kind to one another. We can't act like, uh, Jedi to one another at this point in time. Unfortunately,
Yeah.
it doesn't seem.
Right.
We're a lot more like, the Jedi and the Sith during Revenge of the Sith than we are the Jedi at the end of the Rise of Skywalker at this point in time, and I find that to be pretty disappointing.
It is quite sad. Well,
I'm ringing
yeah.
the proverbial shame bell from
Shame.
yeah, yeah,
Shame.
yeah,
No joke. That'll probably end up being the episode title.
shame bell.
um Well, we've definitely we'll I think we'll leave that be for now, unless some other crazy thing kind of ignites this again, which I'm sure it will. But we'll kind of leave that be. We do have some more things that we'll want to talk about in the following weeks concerning some other views on this that aren't necessarily the just outright reactions to the film, but some other things. So, um, thank you everybody for listening, for being here. Um, if you don't want to hear, well, now it's too late. Maybe I should have put this at the front of the show. But if you want just the upbeat parts, check out at about 35 minutes. And then we'll go off on our rants. And we're not that negative. This man, Jip, we are tame when it comes to that. We're just trying to we're just the guys raising our voices and saying, "Can't we all just get along?"
Yeah, man. Like I don't want people to be mad at one another. This is supposed to be entertainment. This isn't,
Yeah.
this isn't CNN or Fox News. Like we're not. If I wanted that, I could just turn my TV on anytime and get all kinds of junk. This is where I go to
Yeah, we
like
want to be.
enjoy life.
We're not Fox and Friends. We're just the friends part.
Yeah. I'll be there for you.
Oh yeah. When Camino's rain start to fall. Well, thanks for being here, everybody. You know where you can find us at Force Cold pretty much across the board. For all you weirdos out there who listen to podcasts on YouTube or discover them there or want to send your friends links to podcasts on YouTube, I don't know, you can find us on there now. It's not a video podcast, it's still just the audio. But some people do things their own way, and who am I to take that from them? So yeah, you can find us there now. As well as still iTunes, Spotify, SoundCloud, Shout Engine, all that jazz. I am at AK Star Wars Kid on pretty much everything. You can find Jip at Darth Legalis on Twitter. Although I know in the wake of a lot of this craziness, he's been trying to explore other avenues of social media. So
I've been actually completely off of anything electronic at this point in time. I've mostly
that's
been
smart.
just like chiseling my thoughts into rocks on the side of the roads out here in the Pacific Northwest. So if you're driving past any like big boulders or anything like that, I may have chiseled some of my ideas therein. Keep your eyes on the road. Maybe pull over and read them over there.
It's kind of like Creed Bratton with
Creed
Creed
thoughts.
Thoughts.
Yeah, it's very similar to Creed thoughts, except even less accessible.
Well, glad to have everybody here. Hope you're having a wonderful week. We'll talk with you again soon. May the force be with you.